Hey everyone, what's up? What's going on? My name's Joe, and you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? A weekly drunk movie review podcast. This week, we're going to be reviewing Vice. But first, an announcement. Or, if you've been listening to the intros these past few weeks, a reminder that our first live show of 2019 will be on Sunday, January 27th at 3 p.m. We'll be recording a live episode at South Street Cinema as a part of the 2019 Everything is Awesome Headstrong Foundation Comedy Festival. Admission is free, but donations to the Headstrong Foundation are encouraged. It's a really great organization, guys, that improves the lives of those affected by cancer. So come out, support a great cause, and see a great show. And speaking of shows, have you seen our brand new video series, Goldfingers? It's a data-driven Oscar prediction video series that's available only on our YouTube channel. And I think that's everything. So without further ado, let's get right into the episode. This week, we're reviewing Vice. Enjoy.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? Featuring two guys getting ripped to the tits and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast for.
And Scout DeFoya actually said that to us during an episode.
During the favorite. Which was a first. But if you can't get on the podcast to suggest an episode, you can suggest it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, SoundCloud, even...
Right.
Email, any way you can get in contact with us. We'd love to hear your synonyms and put them on the podcast. But this week we got some fun drinks going on this week.
What do you got for us, Mike?
So we're drinking Old Camp American Blended Whiskey. Mm-hmm. That's whatever. But the important thing.
Ooh. It's for you video viewers.
These cool tumbler glasses we got going on.
Ooh, look at these.
Printed with our logo on them. Not for sale, just a cool-ass Christmas gift that my girlfriend Rowan got for us.
They look beautiful.
Yeah.
I really like them.
And then we got some ice whiskey balls in here that I froze orange slices, and thinking that would be a cool thing to drink some whiskey in. So let's try this smooth Old Camp whiskey. I think this is actually pretty cheap stuff. We bought it we cooked one of the appetizers for Thanksgiving dinner. We cooked with this, so it was it's pretty nice packaging for how cheap it was.
Right, yeah, it looks nice.
But it was a step above bottom shelf whiskey.
Well, a step above bottom shelf can get pretty expensive.
Mm.
Ooh, daddy.
Here's whiskey. Let's let that ice melt a little bit.
Oh man, I haven't had hard liquor in quite some time. That's kicking.
You're gonna have some heartburn.
Oh yeah. Oh boy.
Feel the burn. All right. Joe, do you want to read the IMDb description? And then I'm going to totally read some real notes that I wrote for this episode and not off of the Wikipedia page. Is that the whiskey or disgusted? My laziness.
I think that's the whiskey. Okay, so the IMDb description is the story of Dick Cheney, an unassuming, bureaucratic Washington insider who quietly wielded immense power as vice president to George W. Bush, reshaping the country and the globe in ways that we still feel today. It was kind of a weird mouthful I mean, I know I usually read at a weird rhythm, but that was especially
It's a little strange. Yeah.
weird.
It's also just weird to hear like a description of Dick Cheney like that. Like, I don't know. I guess just because we grew up knowing who Dick Cheney was,
Right.
it's weird to have to hear him like described and explained.
Yeah. And it's even a task that's hard to do in this movie.
Yes, we'll get into it. But Vice, of course, written and directed by Adam McKay. Adam McKay was primarily a comedy director for a long time. He did. I'm trying to get to like his big features on this filmography: Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, Step Brothers, The Other Guys, Anchorman 2, The Legend Continues. And then he sort of like switched course in 2015 and did The Big Short, which was one of the first movies that we covered on this podcast, like episode 10, I believe.
Right.
And it was nominated for a couple Academy Awards, including Best Director. Did he get nominated for Best Picture that year?
I believe so. Yeah.
Why is it not showing up? Maybe they just only list the... Anyway, also Academy... It won, I think, the Academy Award for Best Screenplay that year. I remember seeing him accept something that year. He does a lot of producing as well in his credits. But yeah, this is sort of a follow-up to that because it's definitely done in the same style as Big Short, which is like this breaking the fourth wall, sort of almost like pseudo-documentary type thing going on. But it stars Christian Bale, Amy Adams, Steve Carell, Sam Rockwell, Tyler Perry, Allison Pill, Jesse Plemons. I don't know if you stayed for any of like the credits, but did you see that it was like it's produced by Brad Pitt, which I'm not surprised by. He like produces a whole ton of stuff.
Oh, right.
But then it's also produced by a bunch of people, including Will Ferrell.
I saw
Which
that,
makes sense because he's friends with Adam McKay, but it's also still just weird because Will Ferrell does a pretty good job of not like getting involved in like political like topics or debates.
Right.
You know, apart from like doing his impression of George Bush on Saturday Night Live, but like
Right. I was about to say
he's not out there like tweeting like fuck Trump or any shit like that.
I was about to say I wonder if Will Ferrell had any hard feelings about not being cast as George W. Bush. Yeah. He's like, I've got it down, Adam. Yeah.
I'm sure he understands.
Oh no, yeah.
Let's just take a quick scan through, see if there's anything interesting about the production. Blah blah blah. Acquiring rights, producing. Where does the Gary Sanchez name from their production company come from?
I don't know.
Because it's weird. Because I know it predates it, but there's now a famous catcher, like younger catcher for the Yankees named Gary Sanchez. Principal production, release.
Gary Sanchez is a production company operated by Will Ferrell and Adam McKay, named after a fictional Paraguayan entrepreneur and financier, Gary Sanchez. They also founded the... Oh, yeah. So, I don't know. I guess maybe it was a character from their Funny or Die.
Oh, God. I hadn't seen the Rotten Tomatoes. We'll get into that when we do our ratings later, but I hadn't seen the Rotten Tomatoes until now. That's surprising. Yeah, all right. Doesn't look like there's anything really terribly interesting about this. And I don't remember there being any, like, real controversy going on.
What do you mean?
Well, usually with like Oscar season, there's like dirt being dug up on like every film to like sort of like weed the pack down. I feel like nothing has really come out against this so far.
And it did pretty well at the Golden Globes as well.
Yeah. Christian Bale won for Best Actor. What else? It won something else.
I think Adam McKay won. Did he win something?
Maybe screenplay.
Okay, right.
But yeah, maybe original. I guess if Beale Street didn't walk, or Beale Street didn't walk, if Beale Street could talk,
then we couldn't run.
Check out a review of if Beale Street didn't walk.
Beale Street couldn't walk.
Next week.
It's 2 in the morning.
I'm drinking Old Camp whiskey, waiting for the orange flavor to kick in.
Waiting for that orange peel to really save me.
Those dividends aren't really kicking in yet.
But yeah, I mean, I think we saw, I mean, let's talk about this film and, I mean, before it came out. I mean, you hear about kind of Adam McKay directing a new film after The Big Short. I really liked Big Short. And then you hear about Christian Bale kind of, you know, doing his thing to get
eating a bunch of cheeseburgers,
right? To get into to get that Dick Cheney bod, that real thick,
that Dick bod,
yeah, that real 2 C's.
It's all the craze in Hollywood right now. That Dick bod.
And then the trailer came out, which I was kind of like less excited about, but I was kind of also like, okay, I could also see this being really good.
I wasn't crazy about the trailer when it came out. I feel like I like the trailer more now that I've seen the movie.
Right.
And I like the movie less than I thought I would based on seeing the trailer. Like, it's just kind of inverted in a weird way. But like while watching the movie, I just kept hearing like the song from the trailer. I can't remember what it is now in my head. Like, is it like Magic Man or something? Like, I'm a Magic Man, or it's something with I'm a something man. It's just got like this like funky, like upbeat beat to it. You know, a lot of like swagger and cockiness to it. That is like, I don't know. After seeing the movie, I was like, oh yeah, that's like a perfect song to pick for that trailer, because it doesn't necessarily capture the tone of the movie, but it captures sort of the message and the feeling of the movie very well. And like, it's the type of trailer that like definitely probably put a bunch of asses in the seats expecting a maybe different movie, a funnier, more interesting movie.
Yeah, and it's weird. There's a lot of negative reviews, and I've read through some, and some have a kind of valid point. You kind of have, I mean, this film, I don't know if it promises like a biopic, really.
I think you just think of one, because I mean, like the Big Short, there's no like they're playing real characters, but they're not characters that we know, or people that we know, I should say. So like when you're watching the Big Short, like, you know, they could just kind of go off for a couple of minutes on like a Ryan Gosling like narration thing, and it's fine. Like, you know, we can take a break from these characters because we're not coming into it expecting anything. But the formula is a little weird in this, where you are sort of expecting a more standard biopic, and at the same time the more standard biopic stuff that they do really doesn't work in this movie. It's half like biopic, and then it's half like him kind of trying to have a thesis like he did in The Big Short. And my drink's making noise. Shut up.
I don't know. It never really ends up being like either of these things. I don't know. Like, honestly, if I had like I was just talking about this in our review of
Sorry to Bother You.
Sorry to Bother You. Check it out
in 1 or 2 weeks. TBD.
It's just kind of like if I had a snipping tool in an editing program, the first thing I would go after is all of these fucking first scenes where it's just kind of like, it's Dick Cheney and he's drinking, and there's a zoom in on vomit on the floor. He failed out of Yale, and then he's drunk driving, and he's doing whatever profession that is where you're putting up the telephone poles. Yeah, linesman. And then the guy breaks it. It's like bam, guy fucking breaks his leg. Oh, we're drinking at a bar. Oh, there's a fucking bar fight. Oh, he's drunk driving home, and oh, he gets pulled over by a cop, and he's so fucking like, he's so drunk that he's singing to the officer, and he's asked to get out of the car, and he can't even stand on his fucking feet, and it's just all like shock and awe, and it's just all this like weird backstory that never really pays off, and there's no, I'm just kind of like, this is cool, I guess. It never personally grasped me, like any of this really. I was just kind of like, what are we doing here? And then also the story never really touches on any of that, because then all of a sudden there's a confrontation between Amy Adams and like Christian Bale, and she's just like, you gotta get your fucking life together or I'm gonna leave you. And he's like, all right. And then it's just kind of like he gets his life together and becomes one of the most powerful men in the world. It's just kind of like, I wish there was a little more of a
like a structure pulled from like I read like a Dick Cheney book like once, and like, oh, we got to find a way to get like the first like 30 chapters in there, even though the important stuff is like chapters like 40 through 70 or whatever.
Right. And I really wanted,
although I do know he read a ton of Dick Cheney books, but doesn't seem.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like
or maybe he read too many and he wasn't willing to let go of like, we don't necessarily need to know that he had this like drunkard sort of past, like, but because it doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of bearing on the decisions that Dick Cheney made, like,
right. It kind of, well, it's, I mean, I said this about Bohemian Rhapsody, where like this first part, Bohemian Rhapsody feels like a Wikipedia entry. This entire opening scene just feels like a Wikipedia like personal life or something, like entry, or just like I don't know. It was just kind of like he pieced together these things that happened in his past that all were negative, like defining moments, and kind of put them all in like, I don't know, like in like one after another, rapid fire, and was just kind of like, I don't know, make of that as you will. It didn't make sense really to me.
Even on just like a more surface level and like less like cerebrally thinking about it. Hello, it's 2 a.m. I'm drunk. I was telling you that like I had like a really awful theater experience with this movie just because I had a really fucking killer toothache that's been like bothering me all week, and it just sort of, I didn't have time to take any medicine, and it came to like a head during this movie. So I was just dealing with this awful pain throughout the whole movie, and I was really tired from work, and like I was like really nodding off during like the first half of this movie, just like truly fighting sleep. Like literally just trying to like, I knew I was going to like pass out at some point, and trying to just pick like when is like the least important part that I could just like fall asleep during, just like totally losing the fight to sleep. And then I thought the movie picked up in like the second half.
Oh, definitely.
And I didn't have any trouble staying awake during that. And I think that's just kind of like the perfect, like to just really boil the movie down to like, I literally had trouble staying awake during the first half, and then I was wide awake during the second half. And the same condition still existed. Like I was still a tired person seeing this movie after work, and I was still dealing with my toothache in the second half of the movie, but it was just more engaging and compelling, and it kept me awake.
Right.
Like the first half, it doesn't matter, and like the whole like reason anyone wants to see a Dick Cheney movie is to see like the like post 9/11 actions of this kind of like crazy man. And like I definitely think there's things that you should and could keep from the first half of the movie, but it's just kind of like the stuff that as it's relevant to the characters that matter, like I think the scenes with like Donald Rumsfeld are certainly important because they're sort of like mirrored later in the movie, like Rumsfeld showing like Cheney around and giving him like the lay of the land and telling him about the culture of Washington and how all that goes, and then that kind of like flips on its head later when Cheney is able to bring Rumsfeld into the administration, and Rumsfeld's kind of like running around like acting like it's like the 70s or 80s or whenever it was, again, like practically like calling people like sweetheart and shit, and like Chaney has to be like, no, like we need like a softer touch now, and like, and now I'm the man, like showing you around. Like there's definitely stuff that you can take from the first half that could and should be mirrored in the second half, but there's so much just unnecessary stuff there. Like, yeah, everything you're saying, the bar scene, the drinking scene, the linesman scene especially, it's so tonally out of place in this movie.
Especially when they were kind of like looking at the guy who like fell and broke his legs, and it doesn't help that there's like everyone's like, there's a bunch of like guys who say like their one-liner kind of like piece about the guy who just fell, and the old man's like, oh darn, he hurt himself. It was just like a really badly like delivered line. I was just kind of like, what is going on in this movie right now? I don't know, and it is like, this is I mean, so we had The Big Short, which again you can look up our review of, and we really enjoyed that. And I even rewatched that recently. I wasn't totally paying attention. I don't even remember who I was with, but I don't think they had seen it before. But I just remember it really held up, and it almost made me want to give it like a higher score. I don't know what I gave it or whatever, but I was just like, I feel like I even underestimated this film the first time I was giving it praise. And even the person I was watching it with was like, oh, is that true? Like, is that true? And I just feel like that movie was such a public service, and we really, I mean, you said something to that extent. And our guest Kevin went from like I know we made like a meme of it later, but it's just like kind of like Kevin went from a low score to a perfect score like later. But I really can't express how much of a public service that fucking movie is, and it's truly just, it has such a rhythm and a hum to it where you're just involved the entire time. It's so hard now to make something that can really capture people's attention. I mean, I'm sure there's, like normie dads in the fucking Midwest who, can't even really like stay on TNT long enough to finish like The Fast and the Furious or something. But like, I think there's something about The Big Short that's kind of like, this affects me. These are people I know. And, this is a story that I haven't heard about. And it's very easy. There's numbers, like the numbers are there to explain to everyone, and there's these terms and everything, and it's so well done, and it looks like it's a craft of love, the way that it's edited. And then you get to this film, and I really don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Like especially through the editing, I'm just kind of like, what? And like, It's also it's kind of like, I know I've seen so many interviews now where it's just kind of like Adam McKay's just kind of like Vince or Dick Cheney, Vince Cheney. Hey,
it's Dick Cheney's brother, Vince Cheney.
Hey, drama. But
it's like Vince from Entourage with Drama's voice.
But it's
Vince Cheney, baby bro, baby dick.
But it's like Adam McKay, who's like who has like the right idea, where he's kind of like, fucking, Dick Cheney, he's trying to be such like a guy in the shadows, which we see during this film, and like have such a private life and all this stuff. Like, if he doesn't want to say anything, I'm gonna make a fucking movie about him. And it's like a cool like effort, but then you see this movie and you're like, Adam, who is this for? A, and B, like, you probably could have made something else and it probably could have been better. Like, I don't know if this movie needed to be made.
Yeah, there's a lot of comparisons that can be made to The Big Short, where like I think The Big Short, it felt just so cohesive and complete, even though it's kind of like this like paper mache of like all these like different sort of scenes. And even I remember in like The Big Short, like one of my like pseudo complaints was that like it sort of switches totally blanking on what the term for it is, but like because they're using like pictures a lot of the time, it'll go from like 16:9 to like 4:3 ratio.
Right.
Or there's a better word for it.
No, ratio. Yeah.
Right?
Aspect ratio.
Aspect ratio. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. They switch that a lot throughout that because it's almost kind of what is that?
I don't know. I'm trying to.
You seem like you're about to make a bit.
Trying to drown that face with whiskey. Go on. It was literally like last episode we recorded. I couldn't stop this stupid grin when you were like giving your final score about like Sorry to Bother You, so I had to keep like making dumb bits about it, and I was like, what is wrong with my face right now? I'm not that drunk. Like I'm just like I just got like this dumb fucking face on. Like I don't know. I don't have a bit. I just have a stupid smile right now.
Anyway, check out the video on YouTube to know what we're talking about. But it's combining all these different sort of aesthetics to create this more cohesive, coherent whole. And it's so clear, like when you watch The Big Short, that like he probably wrote that from A to B, from start to finish. Like had this whole idea, and like just kind of like the narration just kind of like flows. It's logical. It's, you know, starting big and then getting specific, and it feels like a like video essay on like the financial crisis of 2008. Whereas this, like, I listened to the Director's Cut podcast, and apparently like the script was linear, and then he cut like they probably even like filmed a lot of this stuff linear. Literally. And then we're just kind of like in the editing room like, oh, let's like play around with some stuff, and like it's clear because like the movie starts out like almost like a little too linear, and then it kind of jumps around a bit and is like overlaying all this like different stuff, and it just doesn't work as neatly as it really did in like The Big Short.
I was literally seconds before you said that about to say this looks like it was filmed as a linear film and was too boring, and they tried to recut it as a non-linear film, and it just didn't work.
And that's why I think the second half of this movie is more engaging, compelling, and why I was able to stay awake is because that's the part that's closer to Big Short. Like the first half is just all this like traditional biopic stuff with maybe just like non-traditional narrating is like the one difference. But yeah, like there's scenes in there that it's like if you were going to shoot a traditional biopic for Dick Cheney, yeah, you would have like the linesman scene from like his early life, and you would have the bar fight scene, and you would film all that. But like the stuff that happens more prominently in like the second half of the movie is the stuff that's closer to The Big Short, like the sort of like the overlaying of like the Dick Cheney like fishing scene, and the sort of reveal about the narrator's character that, I mean, we're not ready to spoil yet, but like there's stuff like that that is like sort of taking the movie out of itself in a way that works and pulls you into the movie more.
Right.
Rather than like the first half of the movie, which is like so invested in the movie and stuck in the movie and grounded, and it ends up keeping you out and away from the movie because it's so boring.
I will say, I really don't. I love Jesse Plemons, but I really don't like him as a narrator.
Oh no.
No, I don't know. Is it something with the audio mixing? Is it something about his voice that maybe just doesn't cut through the kind of clutter of this film? There's just something so... he's a fantastic actor, and he's fantastic at what he does. I just don't know if he's a great narrator for a Dick Cheney biopic, you know? It was just kind of like...
Yeah, it's maybe a little off the aesthetic mark.
Yeah, I like the device that they present him with and everything, but like it was just kind of like like, it's fucking rock and roll and fucking drunk and fucking, politics and battling politics and a background song. And then Jesse Plemons is like, you're probably wondering what Dick Cheney is like.
Yeah, like they kind of like the whole like. There's almost like a folk hero aesthetic to the actual script of the narration to this,
right?
And I don't know that Jesse Plemons is the best fit for that. Like, I don't think you would want to go on the nose as to have like Sam Elliott narrate it, but
right.
It seems like something closer to that, like someone a little more older and worldly and wiser in like the narration role. But just on like a surface level, I think I really like Jesse Plemons' performance here, even though it's maybe not the best casting.
Well, I like him when
I'm just a sucker for Jesse Plemons. Like, I think he's so great in every role he does. I just saw like a picture set from the movie Game Night, and it reminded me of probably the hardest I've laughed this year, and I completely forgot about that part. But when they come home and he's like the cop in like the driveway, and he's like, "Oh, I see you've got 3 bags of Tostitos scoops there," and they're like, "Oh yeah, they had a 3-for-1 sale at the grocery store," and he's like, how could that be profitable for Frito-Lay?
Right.
It's like, just his like straight delivery. It was like one of the funniest lines of the year for me. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of like him in this. I see what you're saying. It's not a perfect fit. You definitely could have had someone more like Dick Cheney abides type. Like.
Right. I see. Yeah. No, there is something where I was half expecting it to be, like Alfred Hitchcock narrating his own film or something. Like it was just kind of like, oh, Jesse Plemons' voice doesn't entirely match the aesthetic of the way that this film is cut and everything, especially when we're going through all these different times and decades and everything. And then it's also like, I love him when he's on screen, but then when it's kind of Dick Cheney in his own personal life, and it's just like the only thing to like cut through the noise is just Jesse Plemons' voice. It's just kind of like, I don't think he has that narration voice that is going to cut through the noise.
Yeah, and it also starts to lose the logic there because it's like
right. It's
like there's clearly stuff where we're filling in the gaps, and like when it comes to like specifics about like crimes and stuff like that, I feel like the movie definitely does a good job of like trying to cover its tracks and being like, we don't totally know what happened here, but here's what we do know, and you can sort of assume for yourself. Like, but it doesn't do that so much with the like aspects of Dick Cheney's like personal life. Right. And there's definitely like narration over those, and that's where that narrator character starts to get a little weird.
Yeah, and it's also when you figure out who he is, it's just kind of like, okay, that makes it even like kind of like, it recontextualizes earlier scenes, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, like it's a little, I don't know. It just like, it wasn't, you know what, I'd even probably take the device with maybe just a stronger voice or something, or just I don't know. I love Jesse Plemons. I just don't know if this was the role for him.
I kind of like the device.
Yeah,
I thought it was like one of the few bright spots of the movie because it was. I don't know, like I do kind of like things like that where like a director or a writer will like plant something early and like even like plant it in a such like obvious way that like Jesse Plemons' character literally says like and you'll find out who I am later, so something to that effect, like, but then when we do find out, like, even though we've been told we're going to find out and then it's going to tie in this way that like it was sort of hinted at before, like it still comes as like a shock. Like my whole theater jumped when his character got like hit by the car while he was running, and then you start to put it together.
Oh, really?
What?
Nothing. I kind of thought it was a little like there's some line halfway through where he's like, I don't know Dick Cheney and he doesn't know me and we're not related, or he says something, and I'm like, I bet this is gonna be his like heart transplant.
I thought when that
Yeah.
line happened, I thought it was going to be a guy that died in Iraq
okay.
because of Dick Cheney sending him over there, and then they have the footage of him in Iraq, and I was like, oh, I'm right. Like,
Right, yeah.
I felt like that was what they wanted us to think, and I took the bait there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, you definitely. I could see how people could have. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that he had
There's
a heart
lot
transplant.
of weird red herrings. It's just kind of they intercut 9/11 footage with a picture of like Jesse Plemons hanging out in a factory with like 3 other dudes,
Yeah.
and I thought that was weird.
Well, because I think the whole movie is trying to, or I mean, not the whole movie, but throughout the movie, they're trying to like contextualize and place where Jesse Plemons' character is at those moments. So like, that's why he like his hairstyle changes, his like makeup
Right.
and everything changes, because whatever part of like Dick Cheney's life he's like sort of narrating at that time is what they end up like showing on screen for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
Yeah.
the timeline like totally lines up, because there's definitely some like early life stuff where we see Jesse Plemons' character like raising like his kids, and he definitely wasn't that old when Dick Cheney was that young. But
Right.
they're showing different time periods and it definitely lines up at a certain point.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was one of the few things that I liked about this movie that sort of worked
Yeah.
well.
But then
And like the sort of like fishing through line I thought was nice, because they had like some fishing scenes at first, and then they just sort of started focusing in on, like, it was kind of like they established that tone, and then all they had to do was like just have a quick shot of him like tugging at like the fly line, and that's it. Like, we didn't have to go back into like a whole like, oh, I got him and I'm reeling him in and it's a big fight. Like, they established the metaphor and then they can just hint at it throughout, and that's all we need. Or like even one time they'll just have like a fin like cresting the water and swimming by, and it's like, oh, like he's caught the fish, or he saw the fish that he's going after.
And I do like that. I mean, it is kind of impressive and important. I mean, I've just had like a friend who read one book on Dick Cheney. I can't remember what it's called. It's like a one-word name, and I don't know what it was. I mean, just from what he's told me, though.
Was it Dick?
No, it was it's a word I don't even know what it means.
Oh.
It begins with like an A or something, and I mean, it goes into just deep political fucking, speculation and everything. Which I kind of thought this movie was going to go to, but I think it's this movie kind of ends up being a real fucking like surface, just kind of like surface, like Dick Cheney kind of just, I never really felt like I saw, like, it seems like it was like a really basic kind of like Dick Cheney. Like, I didn't really see a lot of the motive going on, and he seems like such a complex character, and then like in this movie he seems very simplistic. He just kind of seems like follow the power, follow the money, and like that's about it. When I I've heard about him previously, like it seems like he's a very complex character who's very calculated, and especially if you consider like his very high intellect, where he went from, a drunk tank to kind of like the highest power in the world at one point, and it was just kind of like, that can't all just be for money or power. Like, there's something else going on in there, kind of thing.
Maybe. I mean, or I don't know. I can't speak about what's actually true for Dick Cheney, but I think the conceit of this movie is in the title, and that's why the title is Vice, is like power is his vice and whatnot. And yeah, I mean, it definitely has a sort of simplistic view on it. Mm-hmm. And it's one that's not even really explained by like the beginning of the movie. Like, I feel like the reason they wanted that scene in the beginning of the movie of like Amy Adams being like, you need to like get your shit together now, like, because, which was also a weird sort of scene where she's like, because I can't do these things, so I need you to do them. Like, that's, I don't know, I felt a little,
It was very
I cringed a little at that.
the year is, and women can't do as much as men. Hi, I'm Amy Adams, and I'm playing the role of Dick Cheney's wife.
I did think she was good.
She's good. They don't really give her a lot to work with, though.
Well, that's definitely her scene. Mm-hmm. Like, it also felt like the organization of like putting that scene or a scene like that early is like I think Amy Adams is getting to the point where like that's almost like a reveal scene of like, oh, here's Amy Adams. You knew she was in this movie, and here's how good she is. And also, for your consideration, here's the scene at the Oscars. What was I trying to say?
Maybe that's why they have the whole intro just for Amy Adams.
Like that whole scene of her like getting on his ass and being like, you need to get your shit together. Like, I feel like they wanted that in there to maybe try to justify his like thirst for power as like stemming from, because like that whole scene, like it cuts to black and we just have the audio of him being like, I won't let you down again, Lynn, or whatever. So like that's an intentional choice to put that in there. So I feel like they think that it's supposed to be about like his whole quest for power was because he loved his wife so much that he never wanted to let her down again. That's not totally expressed.
Right,
like,
yeah.
Which, like, and that's a weird thing to try to set out to express in a movie, because Dick Cheney is definitely not the type of character who's like super outward and open with his affection when he has any.
Yeah. I don't know.
Let's talk about like Christian Bale and the makeup.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where like it is, from a technical aspect, super impressive what they were able to do with the makeup.
Definitely.
And obviously also part of that is just Christian Bale working with his own personal trainers to like opposite body molding, body fluffening, and trying to create a very specific body image.
I think this is some of the best makeup I've ever seen in a film on Christian Bale's character, and I think it's, I mean, especially when you compare it to something last year like what was the Gary Oldman one?
Darkest Hour,
where I thought that was definitely weak compared to this. This is some like this is great. I thought
that he, though, took this like great makeup that was applied to him that made him look like very convincing, and he maybe ran too deep into impression and almost caricature of Dick Cheney, to a point that like took me out of the movie at times. Like his whole like, I think we can come to an understanding. Like, it sounded like someone almost doing like a really exaggerated like Christopher Walken like impression.
Yeah.
You know, like just like all the pauses that he puts in all of his like words and stuff like that. And like I feel like we end up underappreciating and overlooking like Steve Carell's performance in this, because like those are the type of performances that I want in a biopic. Someone who's willing to be like, yeah, I don't need I'm not making a history movie. Like I'm playing a character, and I should treat this like any other character, and I don't have to like just be focused on like getting every exact mannerism right and stuff like that. Because like Donald Rumsfeld was like a pretty big figure. Like, I mean, obviously not as recognizable as Dick Cheney, but like Steve Carell doesn't play it like an impression at all. He's kind of just like old Steve Carell, but it ends up humanizing the role more. And like, I don't know, I was way more drawn to Donald Rumsfeld than Dick Cheney in this. Similarly to like, I think Sam Rockwell actually does one of the best Bush impressions we've seen, like, because it's like, or Bush performances we've seen, because it's like halfway between impression, like enough to get you there, enough to remind you the character, put him in your head, but also like make it his own. Whereas like I thought like Josh Brolin, when he did Bush in W, didn't go nearly enough into like a impression and really just tried to do his own thing with it. It's like it is a balancing act of like you want people to remember the character that you're trying to put in their heads, but you also want to not be totally beholden to that and do your own thing with it and not let it like limit you. Whereas like I felt like Christian Bale wasn't as good as at like expressing emotions in the whole like Dick Cheney guys, because he's so tied down to like how exactly does he talk and how exactly does he walk and how many seconds of pauses does he put between his like words when he's talking,
Right.
and at what low register would he talk. And it also ends up being weird like in like the earlier scenes, because he's doing this like impression of like 60-year-old Cheney, even when he's playing like 25 or 30-year-old Cheney earlier in the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I believed the young Cheney, just because it seemed like somebody of that era, and then I also, I actually really liked Christian Bale's performance. I think I liked it more than Steve Carell. I think Steve Carell, I don't know, something about me, I wasn't as sold on Steve Carell's performance as Donald Rumsfeld. To start with Christian Bale, I think there was something very, I don't know, there was a lot of moving pieces where, like, I think Adam McKay wrote a very cartoony script, first of all. A lot of things that Dick Cheney was saying was very cartoony. And then I think us believing Christian Bale saying it is us believing Christian Bale as that character and then saying those lines, kind of. You know, like, I think I would put more blame on the script at times than I would on Christian Bale. I don't know. I think Christian Bale sold everything. And I think he was one of the best performances I saw this year. And I think it was a lesser script, honestly.
I think it's his timing, though, because it's not necessarily the words that he says that like took me out of it. It's his timing where like it literally seems like if you like listen to like comedians talk about like doing impressions, they talk about how like, you know, you can do an impression, but there's not a whole lot of range to it because you're just doing an impression of a person in like one specific circumstance. Like on the You Made It Weird podcast, I think it was what's the guy from College Humor, Josh something or
Josh Rubin, I think.
Yeah. He always talks about like how there's like different types of like Robin Williams, and like most people do the like like the fast like zany Robin Williams, but there's also the like wow like Robin Williams that you could do, and there's so many different like tones and elements to people when you're doing impressions. And like I feel like Christian Bale like really just prepared for the one like low pitched gravelly voiced like I think we can come to an understanding
Right, you're right, yeah,
type impression of Dick Cheney, and it's to a point that it feels limiting, and I don't feel like there's any other like real emotions that are expressed through Dick Cheney. And I don't know, I mean I can understand that that's hard because he's not someone that expressed a lot of emotions, you know, on captured media that it would be there for you to review. But that's maybe where I feel like, you know, maybe you have the license if you're just to free yourself from just doing an impression and like imagine what Dick Cheney might sound like when he's mad, or imagine what Dick Cheney might sound like when he's sad, because I guarantee you it's not all just an agreement. You know, like you know, like he just does that same voice the entire time, and it feels limiting.
I was so surprised at how little we saw of Sam Rockwell.
Yeah.
And like I thought that was also to comedic effect, just because of how like little like George W. Bush was involved in his own
legacy.
It's just kind of like we see him at like the party, and then but when he's just kind of like this drunk kind of, and then and then he approaches Dick Cheney, and then like we like really scarcely see him kind of, you know, like all of this, all this planning and everything. It's just every decision Dick Cheney is making, it's just like he's not even present, and it's just so funny. I feel like Sam Rockwell ends up having maybe 15 minutes of screen time in like a 2+ hour film. It's very funny. I don't know, just that the choice to do something like that, especially because they have like promo pictures where George W. is kind of like sitting like laid back in like the Oval Office, like chair, like kind of his feet up on the desk, and then Dick Cheney's like sitting on the desk, like seriously, like talking to him or something. But that was like never a scene in the movie, really. I feel like that was just kind of a pose that they did where it was just kind of like Christian Bale and Sam Rockwell are playing George W. and Dick Cheney. It was just like, it's funny when like you actually get to the final cut of the film and it's just kind of like, oh, Sam Rockwell's not really in this movie at all. Yeah.
I'm just like scanning over this I feel like there's so much to this movie. I'm like trying to remember.
I do.
Like significant parts.
Yeah. I mean, again, with
there's so many like different, like the movie tries to do a bunch of weird things. And I remember thinking that a few of them didn't pay off.
They all feel like too far and in between, and it
wasn't like The Big Short that was like consistently weird, and like when they would like it was just kind of like there was a pace to like, and we're gonna do this weird cutaway now, and then we'll come back. So like when they do like, oh, here's Margot Robbie in a hot tub full of bubbles, like explaining what like Roth IRA or something, whatever financial term they were explaining means,
right? And then in this, it was just kind of like I don't know. None of them really even worked for me. It was just kind of like the whole like Dick Cheney and Lynn Cheney kind of being like it's like the whole Shakespearean thing, and I was just kind of like I don't know. And like also like I was in a sold out theater and like nobody was really going for that. I just like
it was weird.
It was just like I was in like a theater with reclining seats and I just heard the guy like next to me be like like he's just like bored during
time
that
to
scene.
sleep.
Yeah. And then even the where they're going over kind of the
restaurant scene.
Yeah, the restaurant scene with the torture and everything. It's just kind of like that. I wish that was like punched up, kind of, where they don't even kind of like after he says everything, like they don't even go, oh, that like they don't even play into the bit where they're like, oh, that all sounds good. I think we'll have one of everything or something. That like Dick Cheney just goes, sounds good. We'll take it all or something. It's just kind of like something you wouldn't say in a restaurant.
They have a few little interject because like John
Steve Carell says
something.
Like,
oh, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, like he at least gets to play into the bit. But then like the punchline is just kind of like, I think we'll do all the torture. Like just like it's like
yeah, and it's not that smart.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Like it felt like doing like an imitation of like The Big Short, where like every time The Big Short did like a cutaway like that, it made sense because it was like, all right, that was like The Big Short's whole thing. It was trying to explain these like technical stuff to like a 5-year-old. Like it was like explained to me like I'm 5, like Reddit thread,
right?
In like movie form. And a lot of the methods they would use would be like, here's like some celebrity that you probably care about, you like uninformed like kid, and he's gonna explain to you like what these financial terms are, and you'll listen because it's Kylie Jenner or Margot Robbie or whoever the like people were.
Which is what I think comes down to the most important question of this film is, who is this film for? Because I
liberals.
I think yeah, no, it is, but
it's back padding for liberals.
No, It really is, because The Big Short was for everybody. It was completely.
Thank God we didn't vote for this guy.
It was like incredibly like accessible or whatever. But yeah, no. But this film is very fucking snarky, and it's very fucking like I'm surprised Dick Cheney didn't look at the camera like, if you voted for me, you're a fucking asshole. Like, just kind of like, like.
Yeah,
it was just
the Big Short was like, again, because it was characters that we didn't know about. Like, it definitely wasn't completely, but it was like mostly you were able to sort of like remove the like political nature of any of it from the movie, and it was more like topical than political, and it was like propaganda, but like propaganda for like truth about financial situations. So like it was kind of like, yeah, like I can get behind this, like if you want to have a bias about that, like that's fine. It starts to get weirder when you get into an actual biopic about a controversial character, and it feels like it starts to have a bias in terms of left and right in this movie.
Yep.
And an agenda in terms of left and right in this movie. And that just gets really weird and off-putting for me.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just kind of like, I think I saw I don't remember the fucking word that they were saying. I don't know. I've read a bunch of reviews that go like both extremes, where it's just kind of like where they think maybe Adam McKay made this character look too strong and too cool, kind of like anti-hero, kind of like cool guy, kind of, and then a bunch that were like, no, like, how could you think he makes this character look cool? There's a scene where he says like they should make their penises into puppets. Like, that's not cool, kind of thing. And it's just kind of like, there's a middle ground for this, guys. Like, It's not, like, I don't think there's a lot of, like, liberal slam dunking in this movie. But it's
the
also...
The entire thing.
yeah. But it's also not... I don't know. I don't think it... I also think like some people are misinterpreting like bits as kind of just like making like for example, that kind of like, hey boys, I think we should like turn our penises into like puppets and have a puppet show with them or whatever, and like that was a bit to be a testament of how convincing Dick Cheney was. Like, that wasn't like a negative thing. I don't know. It was just, people are getting caught up in like all the weirdest like scenes of this movie, and I was just kind of like, like it's in the middle of what you guys are saying. You guys are just taking the weirdest extremes. Like, I agree with both of you guys, but it's just like, I don't know. There's a lot of weird reviews out there.
It did just feel like liberal propaganda to me, and like that's definitely the thing where I really resonate with you asking like, who is this movie for? Because like,
it's not helping anybody. It's making people feel like shit or proud of themselves, or new. I also read something that was just kind of like, this movie is for people who were too young to remember the Bush administration. And I was just kind of like, they're going to see this film, and they're not stupid. They're going to know it's fucking biased, and they're going to know a ton of liberties were taken. It was just kind of like, I remember the first time I showed, like, my parents W. Both my parents are liberal, but, like, there was, like, a scene where, like, George Bush Sr. is, like his face is, like, blown up, and like the background's all dark, and he's like screaming at George W. and he's like, "You fucking fuck up! I hate you!" And my mom like was like, "Does the director think this happened? Like, I don't get what's going on." And like, what it, like, early 2000s me was like, Mom, you don't get it, man. Like, that's like what George Bush is. But like in retrospect, I was kind of like, wow, that's a really over exaggerated scene. And like, for somebody who's trying to access this, like, you know, this is not accessible to an outsider kind of thing. Like, especially like my mom like hated George W. Bush, but she was still like, what is the point of this scene? Like, it's just kind of like it's trying to show some sort of inner struggle and just everything, but it's so extreme. I need to go back and watch W.
I was just I thought I had like a breakthrough in my mind because on the Director's Cut podcast,
Go for it.
Gus Van Sant interviews Adam McKay, and then you brought up W, and I was like, did Gus Van Sant direct W? That's why he's in this. But no, Oliver Stone directed W.
And you know what Oliver Stone directed?
Snowden.
Yes. Which is why.
I'm Edward Snowden, and I think that cybersecurity is super important.
Oh.
Another person who also took playing a character too deep into impression and forgot how to portray emotions because they're so focused on getting the voice right.
Rainbow Connection.
Miss Piggy, you should really, put a piece of tape over your laptop camera because the NSA can watch you.
Oh.
Kermit the Frog here.
They're watching you masturbate. They'll use it as blackmail.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just to the point of like, who is this movie for? It's like preaching to the choir. And nobody else is listening but the choir, and it's also making half of the choir uncomfortable. Because like me, as like, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone listening to this podcast that like I definitely have liberal leanings when it comes to my political ideology. Like I like to try to remain independent, but I definitely just tend to side with more liberal ideologies. And even as someone like that who, like, I mean, I used to vote Republican, and I kind of sort of switched sides, and like, because of the way I was raised, I like grew up like rooting for like the like Iraq War back then, because it's like brainwashing back then, listening to like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity on the radio and shit like that. But the whole thing just made me feel uncomfortable, and I don't know if it's from the standpoint of like, there's a line somewhere between like art and propaganda, and I feel like this movie comes dangerously close to crossing it, if not tiptoeing over it a few times.
Right.
Like, and that's like the thing, like Big Short. That's like the point I was trying to make before, is that like the Big Short, like, because it's this more important message that is on a topic that like doesn't need to be political unless we make it political. And I thought The Big Short did a pretty good job of that, of just like looking at the hard facts of it, where like this, because it's about a politician, is just sort of inherently political. And it just sort of feels weird to make a movie that, like you said, just kind of like slam dunks on him the entire time. Like, even if that's 100% true and they got all the facts right, it's almost just kind of like, maybe make a documentary, man. Like,
right, where I think,
because
like,
you're already like leaning into that style so hard and borrowing from it to make this weird sort of like fiction movie. Like, it doesn't feel right. Because also, like I said before, like they have like, they do really well with the scenes that like I really like the scene when they're like, oh, like Bush probably met with someone from like the energy sector, and like they have like their faces blurred out when the guys come to the meeting, and they're talking about how they the law said like they had to have someone from an appropriate government body there, and they invite like a secretary who's been working for like 3 months from the EPA to sit on a meeting between Cheney and these like oil executives, and they're like, we don't really know what happened there, but we do have this like unclassified document that shows like that they were dividing up Iraq, and they were lining up which like oil fields to sell to people. And like the movie is really powerful there, like when it's willing to be honest about like, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. And like, you know, that's sort of something that like documentaries are often willing to do. But when it's in like the more like emotional scenes, the movie is so certain, and those are things that we have no fucking idea about. Like Bush Cheney didn't write a goddamn book about like personal conversations that he had with Lynn Cheney about wanting to like consume power and like rise up in the ranks, and how he was gonna turn accepting like the vice presidency into like an actual grab at the presidency, or assuming more role than or more power than the president. Like I don't know, it takes liberties with stuff like that, which I mean most biopics do, but it's weird when it's political, and it's weird when the liberties that it's taking are in the effort of like slam dunking on like Dick Cheney. And I don't mean that to come across like I'm defending Dick Cheney. I just, again, like I feel like I wanted to like this movie because I believe in the things that it's saying, but the method that it uses to say those things really makes me cringe. And that's why, like, that's why I don't know who this movie's for. Like, me as a liberal who should be on the side of this movie, I end up like almost like turning into like a conservative again and being like, fucking like Hollywood is just full of like liberals like patting themselves on the back and like, where exactly. You know, like it's weird. It made me feel so weird to watch this movie.
It is, and especially when you kind of start to, I don't know, people who are educated about Cheney, you know, there's, I don't know, again, this kind of makes him out to be like this kind of like weird villain who is power and money hungry, again, when it's a much more complex political system. Again, I don't know if that would have been more boring. And then, again, like I said, it's, you know, this is kind of to pat liberals on the back, and it's probably going to turn off. Like, I just remember, like, I went over my aunt and uncle's house on Christmas or whatever, and I think one of their neighbors was over there, and he saw Vice, because I think that was like the opening day or something.
Christmas Day.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. And somebody was just like, oh, how was it? And he was like, it's good. It was just like a really like liberal film. And I think he's like a liberal guy, but it was just kind of like,
it's like too liberal.
It's just like, it's just like, it's not even disguised as kind of like right and wrong. It's just very, I don't know. Where it is, it's like, I think, my gosh, why do I keep forgetting fucking Adam McKay's name? It's like, I think Adam McKay's like next film is supposed to be about like global warming, and like that's
better than this. Yeah,
that's so much more in line with like The Big Short, where there's fucking information there, where it's again like I said, like Adam McKay's like, like I want to fucking slam dunk on fucking Dick Cheney because like he's been trying to keep his life so private. I just want to fucking swoop in there and fucking slam dunk on him. Where it's just kind of like, bruh, there's so much information out there. There's so many more things like The Big Short where there's fucking data out there where you can just reference and give the hard-hitting facts instead of speculating about like what this old crusty dude's like life was like. I don't know. It's just it's weird, and it doesn't even commit to like really slam dunking on like Halliburton or like any of this other stuff. It's just kind of like it gives you like a little taste, and then it's just kind of like, I don't know, but he was doing other stuff too. It's just kind of like the entire. It was like this weird. It was just like, even for liberals, this has like, that's why I say like, who's this movie for? Because even for liberals, it's just kind of like this weird tease. It's just kind of like, yeah. And then he probably made a bunch of money off of this, but I don't know. Here's the next scene. Like, it's just kind of like, it never commits to anything either. because it's also trying to ride this fucking line of being a biopic and also like trying to have data in it. And that's also why I don't like it, is because like you said, like they would just have like, you know, fuck it. It's just more accessible when it's Margot Robbie in a bubble bath being like, you know, here's, you know, a Roth IRA or whatever. But instead in this one, it's just it's like a bunch of like text bullet points, and it's so lazy. It just looks fucking lazy a lot of the time. It's just kind of like, he did this, and then like he did this, and then like also this, and it was just kind of like, I don't know. It just felt not like I don't know. It didn't feel like a lot of love went into it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's misguided at parts. It's stuck between, I don't know if it's two good movies or if it's like stuck between two bad movies, and this is the best they could make, was like trying to like cut them together. But like, I don't know, it might have made more sense as sticking to one or the other. Because like I think some of like my favorite parts of the movie are from each aspect of it, but they sort of like don't necessarily work with the other aspect. Mm-hmm. Like there's parts of like the straight biopic that I think I like, because like if you are going to do like a straight biopic, you have, because there's so much more time to fill, because you're not like trying to get all this like information out there as like an educational thing. Like you have much more time to like explore actual like characters and stuff like that. Like, and one of my favorite scenes in this movie ends up being when Dick Cheney calls Donald Rumsfeld to like fire him.
Yeah.
And like I think that's why like I really like Steve Carell's performance in this, is because like, you know, like other times like he's definitely really just kind of being like Steve Carell with like old guy makeup on, but we all like Steve Carell, so it works. But like that's like where like the script is not comedic anymore. The script is dramatic, and he's able to let his like more dramatic chop show, and he just kind of has that whole thing where it's like this sort of like contained rage, where like he has like the one line where he's like, well, you know, I know you're not sorry because I wouldn't be sorry. And he's just kind of sitting there like, yep. I've just been like fired. Like it felt really real, and it didn't really matter to the story. Mm-hmm. And you can have scenes like that in like a straight biopic because there's time to explore the characters like that. But in a movie like this, and especially when you're comparing it to like The Big Short, where it's like information, we've got to get all the information out there. Like those little like moments to breathe kind of feel like a luxury and a vanity in a movie like this. So it's like a good scene on its own, and I really like the acting and the individuality of it. But when you put it like with the whole of the movie, it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense or seem necessary.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about like most of the scenes that I like in this movie. Like,
yeah.
And then like I don't know. This movie is so. There's things that I like, and then for everything that I like, there's something that I dislike about it at the same time. Like there's nothing that I could just enjoy purely. Like right. I thought there was like a really nice sort of like pacing at the end of the whole like heart transplant thing. Like I did actually really like the editing at that point in the movie when they're intercutting sort of this timeline of Dick Cheney like literally having his like heart removed in like the transplant process, so that they like pull his like cold dead literally black heart like out and put it on the table right when he advises his daughter Lynn to basically throw his daughter Mary under the bus. And like I don't know, just from like a pure like, you know, forget politics, forget liberalism, forget all that stuff.
I wish the rest of the movie was like that.
It just makes sense. There's a theme there. There's a through line. There's threads. Everything's connected. It works. But we don't exist in a vacuum. This movie doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a world where politics are real, and that just feels way too slam dunk of like
Oh, yeah.
Cheney literally has a black heart and it's being pulled out on
Right,
the
yeah.
table. Like that just feels weird, and like that like ends up like buying into like this like bipartisan, or I mean the opposite of bipartisan, like just two parties at odds all the time, and you can only pick one or the other, and it's black or it's white, or there's no in between. It's just Democrat or Republican. And if you like Democrats, then you hate Republicans, and vice versa. And you know, you have to side with every single policy that each party has. Like it buys into that ideology of like the other side is evil. And like I just wish the movie would have done more. If it was going to be a movie about Dick Cheney, and I think my thing is maybe just we didn't need a movie about him if it wasn't going to be a documentary that could be cold and not have to be feeling. But I just wish the movie might have tried to do more to like humanize him. Like I think the things that they did weren't necessarily fair in trying to humanize him.
Right.
And like I think, you know, you can make a movie that humanizes a character without forgiving them. You know, like I think
Right.
a really good example that I will always bring up is Social Network. Like, does
What I
that
was
not
about to say. Right.
humanize Mark Zuckerberg while us also being to view that movie and be like, Mark Zuckerberg's a fucking asshole? Like,
Right. No, exactly.
it just sort of explains why he's an asshole. And
But
this movie doesn't explain why Dick Cheney is a power hungry asshole.
But yeah, we didn't have to see Mark Zuckerberg before he got into Harvard and what he was doing in high school. We didn't have to see like, oh, Mark, you know, like did I say Mark Wahlberg before?
No.
Okay.
Now you did.
Well, now it's out there. God damn it. We didn't have to see Mark Zuckerberg being like, or what's it called? We didn't have to see like Mark Zuckerberg like inventing the other things that he invented before he went to Harvard or something in like this scene before we got there. And it's just like, it's also, we didn't have to, I don't know. It's just, that movie is so intelligently written, and obviously, I mean, it's fucking Aaron Sorkin, and that film's a fucking masterclass in every aspect, but it's just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of like, when it's Vice, and it's probably going to be up for Best Picture, watch Goldfingers. It's on YouTube. It's our Oscar prediction video series. I don't know. We're going to fucking hold it to a higher standard. And it's also, I don't know. It's Adam McKay. You made The Big Short. It made quite the splash here at How Many Fingers. You know, and we were hoping you'd make another good film, especially when you have such incredible talent, like fucking, you know, Christian Bale, Amy Adams, Steve Carell, Sam Rockwell, you know, the whole
Tyler Perry, who I thought was pretty good in this.
Oh yeah, definitely. He did what he had to do, kind of thing. I mean, again, it was a smaller role, but yeah,
He's been doing decently with like some of like the dramatic roles he's been given over the last, like, I mean, some I can only think of two. This and Gone Girl.
Yeah.
But he was good in both. Like,
Same. Yeah, I agree.
I feel like anything he can do in the dramatic realm that works must be like incredible acting. If he can just like get us to stop thinking about like, hello, like Medea.
Oh, you Medea. Yeah,
Like I didn't think about that once watching this. I was just like, oh yeah, you're Colin Powell. That's acting. Getting people to forget that you were Medea.
I'm calling him pal, but
Oh, hello. All right. You want to get into some ratings for
yeah,
this?
let's do it.
Hold on. I gotta scroll down. I know I wrote this down somewhere. Nope, that's the wrong one. Wikipedia. I didn't copy it over to the file. Critical response. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 63% based on 227 reviews and an average rating of 6.7 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, Vice takes scattershot aim at its targets, but writer-director Adam McKay hits some satisfying bullseyes, and Christian Bale's transformation is a sight to behold. Sorry, the way that sentence was building up, it sounded like it was going to keep going.
Right, yeah.
And it just did not.
I feel like I'm not far off of that score. I think I'm gonna go with just 3.
I thought you were gonna go much lower than that.
No, I don't know. I think we could. I think this film is net positive. But I don't think it's a good film. I don't think it's a good film by Oscar standards. And I certainly don't think it's a good film by The Big Short standards. Which I thought was a great movie, and that wasn't perfect, but I thought maybe he could kind of perfect it the next time around. But instead of doing something completely different, he kind of does the same thing with his editing, except it just feels lazier. And then, again, just kind of...
It feels more nonsensical.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. It just... yeah, I don't know. I keep really pounding that it looked like I don't know. It just seemed like Adam McKay had something to prove in The Big Short. And this time around, it's just kind of like, well, I made The Big Short, so, like...
I'm Oscar-nominated, bitches.
Right, well, therefore, I should be Oscar-nominated again. He seems a little more comfortable. He seems a little too comfortable. It seems like maybe this idea he was a little more confident in, earlier, and then when it came around to post-production, he was like, I don't know, and then... I don't know. It was just there was such attention to detail in the post production last time around.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a lot of great performances. I'll stick by it. I think Christian Bale gives one of the best performances of the year. Steve Carell gives a pretty good performance. I don't know. I don't think it's well written at all either.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, like I said, it's kind of cartoony, and I think we have such great actors here that they can kind of sell the script for you. But I don't think, again, because it's directed by Adam McKay and it's written by Adam McKay, and I'm sure Adam McKay was at least in that fucking editing bay. It's just kind of like, dude, what happened? It was just kind of like you didn't even really sell us on this kind of cartoony dialogue, or I don't know, or it just didn't seem like you had the same editing that you did during The Big Short. And I don't know. It argues the question, why did you make this film? I think somebody of your talent with a talented cast can make something that warrants a, above average score from me. But it ultimately begs the question, why did you make this film? Who's this film for? And those are only 2 questions that I have.
No further questions, Your Honor.
And God, I wish I had a fucking killer third question, but I don't. Someone pass it off to you, Mike.
Yeah, I think I'm also gonna give it a 3. I thought you were gonna go a lot lower with that. If I could give,
you're gonna make me out to be the bad guy, huh?
If I could give this a 2.75, I would definitely go for that.
Oh,
I think it's above average, but as minimally above average as I can go. There's definitely some stuff that I like. I think Steve Carell might be one of my favorite supporting actor performances of the year. Sam Rockwell's up there. I think I appreciate Steve Carell's more because it's further from impression and more into just capturing the essence of that character while still just being himself. And I can always appreciate when someone's able to do that.
Yeah, I'm surprised Sam Rockwell won the Golden Globe, or just the nomination, just because of how little he was in this film.
I mean, he is good, and he's playing the more recognizable characters,
right?
And he's coming off of the 3 Billboards award circuit from last year, so he's got the name recognition. He's a hot commodity right now, so I get it. But Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to like this movie more because based on how I liked Big Short and how much I sort of like believe in the ideas of this film. But I kind of wish he didn't make a movie for me and he made a movie for like Middle America. And, like,
Yeah, definitely.
you know, like, because that's
Yeah.
what The Big Short felt like to
Yes.
me, was like explaining like high concept financial things to the layman, where I feel like if you're gonna make a political movie, then it should be about explaining like almost like progressive liberalist ideas in terms of our view on the opposite side of the spectrum to the middle of the road, you know, like explain Dick Cheney to the undecideds and the independents and libertarians and stuff like that, rather than like explain Dick Cheney to people who already grew up knowing who Dick Cheney was and
Right,
like what he
yeah.
did. Like, and like, I don't know, like I enjoyed parts of this movie personally because they reminded me of sort of things that I lived through but completely forgot happened. Like, I had just honestly totally forgot that like there was that whole period where we were like, oh yeah, like there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that's what we're going and looking for, and then we found nothing. Like that's just, we've totally moved on from that as a society. And you know, I do appreciate that this movie is sort of being like, yeah, why the fuck did we move on from remembering how shitty like George Bush and Dick Cheney were? I just wish they could have done it in a way that was either more tactful or more fair, and or just less obvious with its bias here. Because like, even me as someone who believes in the things this film is saying, I just can't get behind it because like, you know, the movie doesn't need to be for me. You don't need to convince me that Dick Cheney was an asshole. Like, you got to convince other people. Like, it's probably how, like, you know, like crazy smart like financial people might have felt watching The Big Short. Like, yeah, like I get it. Like,
Right.
you don't
yeah.
need to make this movie for me.
It's also like especially like a director who directed Step Brothers and Talladega Nights and Anchorman. It's kind of like you have the ear of the masses.
Yeah.
Why fucking
You're the
What-
director
what-
that makes the movie that like every frat boy quotes.
right? Like why not present an idea to them instead of fucking cramming it in their face and being like, you're fucking wrong for thinking what your parents think, dude.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's just like it's you fucked it up, man.
It's cringy. So yeah, I'll give it a 3. So obviously our final score here will be a 3. And it's a shame because like he has some like bold ideas. You know, he's someone who's been just making traditional, maybe not traditional comedies, because like his comedies were sort of breaking the mold for a while and or defining comedy for a while. But they were at least in like traditional story arcs and traditional molds as far as like filmmaking went. And I feel like he did that for so long that like now he's just like enjoying like breaking free of that mold. He like talked for a lot on the Director's Cut podcast about how like writing drama is very freeing, because with comedy, like it's like jokes per minute and like everything you're doing has to be with the sole intention of making people laugh as hard as possible every like second of the movie. Or like drama, like sometimes things can happen just because you need to get to the next scene or things need to happen, and not everything has to be for the soul for one singular intention the entire time. So he's talking about how like that was sort of like freeing, and I can imagine that like he feels freed by being able to sort of like buck the trends of traditional filmmaking and traditional story structure with the things he does with his films. Yeah, I just wish he could do it in a way that was made more sense. And
I didn't realize he
Disappointing.
directed the other guys.
yeah,
That's disappointing.
yeah, like that one.
No, I was very stoned when I watched that movie. And I laughed maybe once And that's like, I think that's trouble. I think that's fucking.
Can't make
I
High
think that's
Joe laugh.
fucking trouble when you like when you can't make. I think I was watching with Dave too. It was just kind of like our old roommate. And if you're like very high, and you're watching a comedy movie,
And you don't laugh.
and you don't laugh, I think you're in trouble. Maybe that's why he made. Maybe he's looking in on that dorm room and was like, "Shit, I gotta make The Big Short. It's time to move on."
Yeah. So all that comes to a 3. As always, for us, you can find everything at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Check out our Goldfingers episodes. Episode 3 should be up right now. Episode 4 should be coming out soon after this comes out. Maybe next week or the week after that. And most importantly, come see our live performance. January 27th, it's a Sunday at 3 p.m. at South Street Cinema in Philadelphia. We're performing as part of the 2019 Everything is Awesome Headstrong Comedy Festival, which is put together by the podcast Everything is Awesome, and it's done to support Headstrong, which is a foundation that strives to provide essential services to those whose lives are affected by cancer. So it's a great cause. It's a free event. Donations are encouraged, though. Joe, what is the smile for?
I don't know. I can't control it. It just comes. I hope you guys.
Just having a good time tonight.
I hope you guys come. Yeah.
Yeah, so come check that out. And if you're listening to this after the fact, there should be a live recording of this show, so you can check out our live performance. All right, it's almost 3:30 in the morning, so I think we're going to get the hell out of this episode. Check out our review of If Beale Street Could Talk at some point with some guest, and Sorry to Bother You with Alex Berezanski at some point with him. Either next week or the week after.
We're going to see.
There might be another one in between. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.